Man Up, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. And now, it's time to Man Up.
Welcome to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. I am Joe Stopulos, and today I am joined by Tim Carney to discuss his book, Family Unfriendly, How Our Culture Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be. Let's start in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Tim Carney, for those of you who were at the Forge conference this year, you would remember him. He gave a very good talk on his book, on this concept of family unfriendly. My more astute and dedicated listeners would remember him from, I believe, 2019 when I had him on for his last book, which was called Alienated America, which is also a very good read as well. This one really hits on a lot of the things that I talk about on this show, and he really puts it all together with data, with research. It's a labor of love how much work he put into this. But as anyone that could attest that went to the Forge conference would know, he packages this idea of what I would call the Catholic vision of family and society, and makes a compelling case for why we need to get back to it and how to do it. So excited to have him on the other side of the break. Head to a short break. We'll be right back.
It's time to Man Up. Mondays at 9 a.m. Central. Man Up with Joe Stopulos on Iowa Catholic Radio and on demand on the Iowa Catholic Radio app. This is Iowa Catholic Radio, connecting people to Christ.
Lead me to repentance.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. Excited today to be joined by Tim Carney. He is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he works on civil society, family, localism, religion in America, economic competition, and electoral politics. He is also concurrently a senior columnist at the Washington Examiner. His newest book, Family Unfriendly, How Our Culture Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be, was published back in March of 24. He's also the author of Alienated America, Why Some Places Thrive While Others Collapse, which he was on the show for a few years back to discuss. Very germane to the conversation today. He's also a father of 6 and a devout husband. How's that, Tim? How are we doing?
That's a great bio. I love it. Thank you.
You got it. Well, you were a hit at the Forge conference back in February or March or whenever that was. I did a lot of talking with people afterwards, and your talk continued to come up. So you're obviously resonating. Excellent. You're also like peak preaching to the choir, though. Like you're as a guy who's got 7 kids. I'm like, let's get this guy on with 6 kids and we'll just yell about why the world is screwed up for families like ours. So this is gonna work out great. I think you obviously your book, obviously, in your talk, I should say, more than anything, and then I know people who are now reading the book because of the talk, it obviously hit on something that people are feeling. And so let's maybe start to this, maybe go back, because you started writing this years and years ago, because there's a ton of research in it. Mm-hmm. What was the impetus for writing a book like this?
Well, you mentioned my earlier book, Alienated America. That's about kind of the collapse of community, collapse of belonging in the U.S., sort of bowling alone, but with more church in it and sort of updated for current politics and that sort of thing. And I realized while finishing that the most important consequence of this problem, some people call the problem a crisis of loneliness, the most important consequence of it was the decline in family formation. People are getting married less. People are having fewer children. And the younger people right now, the people just about college age, are expressing less and less interest in wanting children. And so I think it's good to get married and have children. But my editor in New York was like, I don't think a Catholic dad of 6 should just wag his finger at people and say, you ought to marry that girl and have babies for every other year for a decade.
Let the record show I'm okay with that. I don't care what they say. I'm cool with it. Okay.
But so I decided to think, okay, so why aren't people having kids? And as a political journalist, I get to travel around the country. I interview people, look at polling and that sort of thing. And in addition to why aren't they having kids, I just asked, well, what can we do to make family life easier? And for the most part, I don't talk about government programs. I don't talk about finances. So I do talk about them some, and we should talk about it. But for the most part, I realize the problem is cultural. That the book Family Unfriendly, the first scene is this T-ball league that was set up that was not like super competitive travel sports, but it's also mostly a place where we could bring our kids and ignore them while they run around. And that's what I realized. Wait a second. Here in Sprawlsville, suburbia, I have to drive my kids everywhere. That's an anti-family force. And once you start looking for these things that are family unfriendly, you see a lot of them and you think, is our modern world really made for family as much as it should be?
Yeah, the question then becomes, what is it made for? It's interesting. I joke about getting off of Twitter, but it's really hard because you talk about all these stats about people not having kids and whatnot. I'm like, and I do know the answer is my algorithm in Twitter is clearly bringing me more of that stuff because they know I agree with it. But at the same time, you just see all the stats from across the country on these various things. And again, a lot of the people I hang out with, a lot of the things I follow, you go down some rabbit holes on just how bad these problems are, and then you decide to write a book on it. I mean, an entire book that's predicated on all these things that I've been screaming about for years. I mean, even you're getting into in the book, we'll dive through the chapters. I mean, you get into like roads and cars, and that's something that
sidewalks.
I remember the first time I heard one of my friends complaining about cars. I'm like, what's wrong with cars? And I'm like, oh, cars are the worst. Okay, I agree. Cars are the worst. It's funny. So on my notes here, I didn't mention on my head here, I'm thinking Alienated America, while it's a totally different subject and it's about politics, but it's also really about it's about culture, and it's about the breakdown of culture. And this is tangentially related. I mean, they're definitely parallel paths through a different lens. And so I think as we were maybe off the top, and then I want to kind of go chapter by chapter a little bit. When you were looking at this, and maybe now that you've had time to digest it, what are the top 2-3 things that you think makes our culture so family unfriendly?
So number one, I would say parenting culture, that parents for some reason believe that they have to do absolutely everything for their kids. So I actually conducted focus groups and I talked to guys and women who either didn't want kids or weren't sure. And a common theme was, I don't just want to give my children a safe childhood. I want to give them the best of everything. You know, we're going to go to Disney. I'm going to give them, tutors. They're going to get into Ivy League schools, and then the helicopter parenting. And then what I talked about at the Forge conference, all of a sudden you can't just put your kid on a little league team where some random dad is coaching them. You have to put them on a travel team and hire them a pitching coach. And so parenting culture that becomes super intensive makes the whole task of raising kids look a lot harder than it is, and makes the idea of having more than 1 or 2 kids impossible. And if I'm going to go sort of slightly deeper, I would say it's our culture's values, that we're too individualistic. We're too transactional. I don't like to say, oh, those millennials, they want their avocado toasts instead of having kids. I think it's more that they're terrified of getting married and having kids because all of a sudden you're dependent on other people. Your life is not your own anymore. And we're taught that is, whether you're right, like a left-wing feminist or sort of a right-wing sort of conservative, go get 'em, self-starter, self-made man. We hold on to autonomy too much. And Joe, like when you get married, you give up a lot of autonomy. When you have kids, you're basically a human jungle gym. Your life is largely controlled by these people. And that sounds really bad to a lot of people. But if you've been through it, you know how beautiful it is to have somebody you're attached to. But that's not something that we really value. So I would say the parenting culture and the culture's values are definitely two of the big problems.
So I've said, especially when I talk about marriage and family, I use Bishop Barron's line about your life is not about you. Like, until you realize until you realize your life is truly not about you. It's not just some pious saying. It's true. Your life is about others and how you interact with those others. And who are you called to serve? At the end of your life, you're going to look back and say, who did I pour myself into? And you have a line in the book, and we can get to, I think I have it written down somewhere, about the cheat code that parenting is. I mean, it is literally a cheat code to sanctity, because you wake up every day and you know who you have to serve. And so it realigns your life from an inward focused person to a others focused person.
A huge part of the book is saying if our culture changes in these ways, parenting will be easier. But then I admit at the end of the book, if you do it, it's going to be the hardest thing you ever do. But it's the easiest path if your goal is high enough, as you were saying. If you want to be a saint, it's like I use the Konami code, which I've gotten scolded by other Gen Xers for getting it wrong. But you know what I mean? Left, right, up, down, down.
Yes.
Yes.
I checked it. I did check it afterwards to make sure because I played a little bit of video games growing up. Yeah.
And so the sort of biblical idea of we're supposed to feed the hungry and clothe the naked. You and I wake up, there are hungry, naked people in our house. They're right there for us.
Surrounded by them all day long. And they're thirsty. They're always thirsty. Why are my kids always thirsty?
They're always thirsty the moment they get in the car or at bedtime.
I'm also not. They also lose their shoes a lot. The Bible, I don't know if it says about give shoes to the shoeless, but that's something my kids are good at. All right, so let's kind of dive into a few of these things. I want to start maybe at the top, and I'm imagining just through this conversation, we're probably going to go 2 episodes on this. But one of the first things I want to kind of jump into is I'll go chapter by chapter, but I want to highlight a few of these things, and I think you hold up some things that I'd never really, I will say, when I'm reading this book, I turn over to my wife, we're reading the night together. I'm like, oh, you got to read this line. Oh, this is a great line. You got to read this line. So everyone's going to need to go out and buy this book. It's really good.
And ideally your wife should have her own copy too.
Yeah. And we sit there and we just highlight what we want to highlight. But I mean, you put the stay-at-home mom, I mean, we'll get to that chapter, but you hold them to such a high esteem. It's so beautiful. All right. So chapter number 1. Have lower ambitions for your kids. So this kind of gets into that whole travel team trap thing. And I think it's beautiful. So Ricky Stanzi and I, Ricky was one of the speakers, obviously, at the Forge conference. And so I was driving him around afterwards, and we went and had more cigars afterwards. And one of the things came up was your talk. And he said, my wife and I have this discussion on, do we need to have our kids in more travel teams? Like, they're not in travel team right now. Ricky has followed your advice before knowing it, which is to say we have to opt out of this. And she's like, well, you're an NFL quarterback. Are we not holding our kids up to the highest degree possible? And he's like, I'm 6'6", I have giant hands, and I was driven from that age to be the best I could be. Like, period. Like, I wanted to be all this stuff. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And you couldn't stop me because I had the drive and the talent. It was like, not every kid in the world, whether they're my son or not, is going to have that. And you make that point so often. Like, it's interesting coming from Des Moines. I was always like, you're from Des Moines, Iowa. My kids, you're from Des Moines, Iowa. You're not going to be an NBA superstar. And then Caitlin Clark grows up 1 mile from my house. But Caitlin Clark has a motor on her and an IQ and a stick-to-itiveness that this doesn't grow on trees. That's
what you're making is one of the arguments against just buying fully into the travel team idea, or I call it a trap because parents get sucked into it. But the idea is it's not going to work. If your kid is not a premier athlete, some kid who is going to be like, you know what? I'm done with baseball. I'm going to pick up lacrosse and then take the starting job from your son who has done nothing but lacrosse since age 6. It's 100%. Not going to work. But that's not the most important argument against the travel team trap that I make in that first chapter. The biggest problems are it messes up family life. And it gives your kid a wrong perspective, a wrong understanding of him or herself. And so I'll get to that second one later. But, if you have a bunch of kids and you're always traveling with one of them to a baseball tournament, 5 counties, 2 states away every weekend, then you're leaving your wife with the other kids, or your kids who aren't athletes feel left out because all that dad cares about is wrestling, or all that dad cares about is basketball. And that gets at the more important part, the anthropological problem. As a dad, you're supposed to show your kid sort of not just who he or she should be, but who he or she is. And if the only thing you talk to him about is baseball, if you spend all your money on baseball, if you spend all your time on baseball, then that's who he thinks he is. And then when eventually he fails, he doesn't...
Which he will.
Which he will. Eventually, especially as you go up that travel team ladder. Like, I mean, I had a nephew who's a great wrestler, and he would go up, and then all of a sudden he'd get to a national tournament and have to wrestle guys from Iowa. And he'd just be like, I thought I was the best, and I was like the 100th best guy in my weight class in that gym. But guess what? Failing is good for kids, but not. but not if they're failing at the thing to which you have attached their worth and their identity. So that's the main problem I go through with the travel sports is it breaks up the family and it makes a kid think that his or her value is in these achievements.
Yeah. Let the record show sports are good. I'm a huge proponent of sports,
Yes. Teamwork,
teamwork, hard work, all these things, struggling, learning to lose. There are so many lessons to learn from sports, but to monopolize the family is where the biggest the issue is. And again, to your point and to Ricky Stanzi's point, the idea, and I use this example all the time with my son. My son's pretty good at soccer. Well, most of the really good kids have gone and they're doing travel stuff. So he's he's the best of the guys who are left, or he's one of the better ones. And I had to remind him, remember like in preschool, he played like 6-year-old soccer or 5-year-old soccer. And there was a kid who was the coach's son who was by far the best player in the field. By far. Like so much better. And guess what? Like he's probably today the best player in the field in a much different league, in a much higher league. My buddy growing up was the same way. And guess what? He played in college, was an All-American in college, and won a national championship. You could tell at age 6 that no matter how many clinics I went to, this was not. It wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. So I think having a healthy perspective. Again, I am very pro sports. I love the idea of our kids getting involved in sports and learning things through that. But the travel team trap the way you put it out is, again, it's bad for the whole family from start to finish. Anything else on that before we go to chapter 2?
No, let's go.
All right, chapter 2. This is now, I could have written this chapter. Hey parents, leave your kids alone. Great. I'm in. So I think I told you at the conference that I've lost multiple children. Multiple children have been lost, and now I feel I've never felt like a better dad since reading your book. So I'm going to start with this. This relates to something you said earlier. There's a quote you have in there. Mothers of 3 children experienced more stress than mothers of 1 or 2. Mothers of 4 or more experienced less stress. A Norwegian study found that living in a large family was associated with lower levels of stress and anxiety. That is because you physically can't track all the children. You can't do it. And so you lowered the bar. We have now lowered the bar for expectations, which frees you up to be a better parent.
No, that's exactly right. And so, I mean, again, the have lower ambitions for your kids is sort of a joke. Our ambitions for our kids is that they be saints, right? But my baseball ambitions are not that high. But in general, also that I don't need to know what they're doing at every moment. Now, when they're young, I mean, raising kids is like you're erecting walled gardens and you're expanding it, and you want them to have freedom within a safe environment. So if they're 2, you need like a little fenced in backyard or back porch or something to make sure they don't, wander off, get run over by a car, pick up a rattlesnake, etc. And then as they get older, you increase that and you give them the freedom to get into trouble and get out of trouble at an age appropriate level. And so one of the lines I have in that chapter is, if you never lose your children, you're not having enough fun. I tell the story of Sean, my youngest boy, how I lost him twice in a weekend, and I have a variety of different stories there. And I'm not like losing him in inner city Baltimore at 1 a.m., right? I'm not losing him on a sea kayaking adventure. I went to a museum, and it was an awesome museum, the Marine Corps Museum. And I wanted to look at the Cold War exhibit. He wanted to look at the World War II museum. I thought he'd be with his brothers. No idea where he is. The Marine at the front door ends up calling me and being like, I have your son. Because I lost him in a setting where, was I stressed out? Was I like, Katie's going to kill me if she finds out I lost the kid? Yeah. But then it's like, everything's fine. And so, but that idea of a free range childhood is important. And I've always thought that. You've probably always thought that. But psychiatrists have started to come out and be like, actually, yeah, the reason that there's an epidemic of childhood anxiety is because these kids who are now 13, 18, whatever, is they weren't set free. They were scheduled. They were supervised too much.
And so to your point, though, when you have 7 kids or 6 kids or 8 kids, 10 kids, you cannot, your opportunities for allowing them to go out are substantially higher than if you have 1 or 2. Again.
Yeah, no, the joke is always when you go to 3, you're in zone defense. The real goal is like the NBA All-Star game, where you don't even play defense. Yeah, you're just walking off
nonstop.
Yes.
The NBA All-Star, that's my house. It's just the NBA All-Star game, scores 180 to 160. My point on this is not all of our listeners are going to have 100 kids. So if you have 1, 2, or 3 kids, like you have to then somehow manufacture this, and it's going to be harder for you to do that than it is for me. It just is. Naturally, I cannot keep eyes on 7 kids at all times. My neighbors all know this. Like they've seen it. They've watched the circus from the outside. And so, but there's a healthy part of that. And so if you only have 1, 2, or 3 kids and you actually have the ability to watch all of them, you're going to need to figure out a way to naturally put in detachment,
the temptation,
and let them go in the neighborhood, let them get lost,
and a big part of that helps parents is, again, having a stronger community. The more you know your neighbors, and the more your kids know the neighbors, the more that you're fine just letting them run around, because, well, if the kid who's 2 gets out, somebody's going to spot them and be like, Connor, I don't think you should be there, and can bring you home. And so the more connected you are in your neighborhood, the easier it is to let them run free.
Yeah, you talk about criminalizing parenthood and living in a culture of fear. I hear people all the time like, well, you can't leave your kid in a car when you go into the store. I'm like, yeah, I can. Like, what are you talking about? I'm going to be in there for 1 minute. I'm not going to bring 6 kids into the store. They're going to stay in the car. By the way, if they get stolen, like the person who stole them is the criminal here. Like, what are we doing here? And by the way, that doesn't happen statistically.
It does. It statistically doesn't happen, but because it gets carried in the media when it does, though, once a week, if it happened in a country of 340 million, well, that's less than a 1 in a million odds of this happening to your kid. But it's a horrible thing, but it seems like it's constantly happening because our brains think, oh, well, I hear about it every week. And I tell the story of a mom who basically, she got arrested for deciding that it was better to run into Target. It wasn't like a 90-degree day. She was in the store for 7 minutes, and some woman, instead of being like, excuse me, like, do you need help? Do you want me to watch your kid or get the thing from Target? Instead, like, films the whole thing and sends it to the police. Yeah. And that criminalizing of parenthood is definitely a family unfriendly.
Well, as a person who's had the police called on him now twice for this kind of thing, both times the police come to me, it's like, you're totally fine. You just want to let them know your kid did ride their bike 2 miles away from your house and he's 4. I'm like, well, that was not good. It wasn't a great parenting moment. But the point of that is there is a level of, maybe I'm too far in the extreme of letting my kids run free, but I would err on the side of that versus not. And again, I think to your point, on the societal standpoint, we as a society have to become better at understanding these things and creating a society where we want to be able to parent in this way, because the result of that, as you just mentioned, the psychological data is coming out, and it is not in favor of helicopter parenting. It's the exact opposite of that.
Correct.
And so we want to have a healthy populace going forward. We're going to have to start doing this. We're going to have to start allowing, as a society, people to go back to the 1960s a little bit of just letting kids wander in the streets, letting them go to the park by themselves, let them ride their bike 2 miles to a job. Like that should be encouraged, not fear-mongered across the media. All right, so here's the deal. We're only 2 chapters in, and so we're going to have you on next week. Here's what we're going to do. Tune in next week as we fly through the rest of the book. But as I said, this is a very important conversation, and I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're giving a little more time because, again, the book, Family Unfriendly, Tim Carney, go out and buy it right now. Do you have a preferred place for them to buy it, or do you not care?
No, wherever books are sold.
But go get it. It is a really good read. Tim will have you back on it next week, and we'll try to get as many of the chapters as we can done next week. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. Stick around. We'll head to a short break, and we'll be right back.
Weekdays at 5 p.m., it's Catholic Answers, a live call-in program to offer Catholics and non-Catholics a chance to talk with world-class apologists and theologians. Catholic Answers, live on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, connecting people to Christ.
Lead me to repentance.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. As you can tell, that interview, we need a lot more. Might need to go 3 episodes, to be honest with you. And quite frankly, this book, as written, and given the content of the show being about, obviously, fatherhood, masculinity, all these things, this book, we could really spend months on it, just going through these topics, because they are so important to us as fathers to reclaim Catholic identity, to reclaim the idea of normalizing large families, normalizing losing kids, as I mentioned. I think that should be normalized. There's one thing that we didn't actually touch on that was tangential to this, which is he talks about unfriendly family dynamics. And I use there's the line about, you come home when the street lights turn on, and that harkens to a day when people used to play outside all night until the street lights came on, and we gave kids autonomy to go out and do that. And he uses the idea of a fence. Obviously, it's a smaller fence when you're a baby, but as you get bigger, concentric circles getting larger. This idea of allowing children the freedom to flourish, the freedom to go and to learn for themselves and to take responsibility for themselves, and how beautiful that is. I remember Senator Ben Sasse spoke a lot about this in his book, The Vanishing American Adult, another great read, but just talking about how kids today have so much just given to them, and parents are scared to allow them the flexibility or the freedom. And in doing that, we stifle them, and we don't give them the wings they need, right? So we should be wanting to give them wings to fly away, to be able to be confident enough to do that, to make the decisions, to forge their own path in life. And we don't do that if we're not allowing them the freedom to do that. And I think his idea, kind of this mentality of allowing your children to roam, this free-range parenting idea, is good. It's beneficial for the children. And the way he puts it is it's beneficial for the parents. The idea, he talks about that softball. If you were at the Forge conference, he talked more about that softball league, where he goes, it's also good. Yes, it's good for the kids to get together and play softball and do these things, but it's also good for the parents to sit around and drink a beer and not talk about the kids and think about the kids, or talk about just to be stressed watching the kids. They can just be adults, and everyone can do life together. And he has a lot of examples like that in the book. So we'll have more to cover next week. Again, I do encourage you to go out, buy the book, Family Unfriendly. It's a really good read. You'll want to, once you get done reading it, you want to pass it on to a friend. So thanks for joining me today on Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulos. It's time to man up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness.
What legacy would you like to leave? As part of the Legacy Society, your gift supports the future of the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. By participating in the planned giving process, you can be assured that when you leave this earth, your charitable gift will continue to support this apostolate and its mission of connecting people to Christ. If you're interested in including Iowa Catholic Radio as part of your charitable gift planning, call me, Belle Marasco, at 515-223-1150. Thank you for your prayerful support.